Imagine waking up, you see news about a terrible storm, a flood, and you think, wait, could this be something more than just bad luck? What if the weather wasn't just, weather? Think about a world, maybe a hidden one, where big powers could actually weaponize rain or storms or even cause droughts on purpose.
It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it?
It is. And today, that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
Taking a deep dive into this really fascinating speculative idea, a hypothetical secret weather manipulation war between, say, the United States and China.
Yeah, and our mission here, for you listening, is to explore how something like that might actually play out. We've looked at what seems plausible based on current tech, maybe some future tech,
Right?
for weather modification. And this is the interesting part, we've used real-world natural disaster data from both countries, from 2023 up to mid-July 2025.
Using it as a kind of proxy, right? Like
Yeah.
an indirect way to gauge the possible outcomes of this theoretical hidden conflict.
Exactly, a proxy.
And what this means for you is we're going to pull out the key ideas, the frameworks you need to grasp this concept. We'll try to figure out who might be, winning in this theoretical shadow war and what the real limits and implications are.
All designed to give you a quick, but still pretty thorough handle on this whole intriguing idea.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We need some ground rules for this hypothetical fight. First up, the technology itself. What are we assuming they can do?
Well, the core assumption is that both sides have or could develop pretty advanced capabilities. We're talking about systems able to genuinely influence rainfall, maybe ramp up storm intensity, or even nudge regional temperatures.
And like you said, it's not pure fantasy. There are real things that hint at this possibility.
Absolutely. Think about cloud seeding. Both the US and China already do it. China famously used it during the 2008 Beijing Olympics, trying to clear the air or stop rain.
I remember that.
Yeah. Then you have the more speculative stuff, like manipulating the ionosphere, maybe with HARP-like systems, or even technology still theoretical to actually steer storms or trigger droughts.
And didn't the US military look into this way back during Vietnam?
They did. Operation Popeye, trying to extend the monsoon season over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So the idea of weather as a weapon isn't new.
Okay, so if we assume they have these kinds of tools, what would the goals be in a secret weather war? What are they trying to achieve?
Primarily, I think economic disruption. That's the big one. You try to trigger floods or droughts or maybe unusually severe storms to damage the other side's infrastructure, mess up their agriculture, hit their big cities.
Makes sense. Cripple the economy. But is it just about money? Or are there other goals?
Oh, definitely more. It's also about geopolitical leverage. You weaken your opponent's resilience, right? Force them to spend massive amounts of money and attention on disaster recovery instead of, say, military spending or other projects. And crucially, because it's a secret war, plausible deniability is everything. Whatever you do has to look like a natural event. Otherwise...
Otherwise, it's not secret anymore and things could escalate fast.
Exactly. Detection is the nightmare scenario. But, there are huge limitations here, too.
Yeah, I was going to ask, you can't just dial up a hurricane precisely where you want it, can you?
Not even close. Weather is unbelievably complex, so manipulation is inherently imprecise. You've got massive risks of unintended consequences.
Like blowback, it hitting you instead.
Precisely. Blowback is a huge concern. The storm veers off course, the drought spreads, maybe it even impacts a neutral country, creating a diplomatic incident.
And the resources needed must be immense. Energy, computing power.
Oh, astronomical. Vast energy, super advanced forecasting that we probably don't even have yet, complex delivery systems, aircraft, maybe satellites. It's a monumental undertaking.
And always that risk of getting caught. That's the ultimate limitation, I guess.
It really is. Detection could mean anything from severe diplomatic fallout to, actual conflict.
Okay, so that's the framework. Now let's look at the evidence using that disaster data as our proxy. What have the last few years looked like? Let's start with the US.
All right, so for the U.S., 2023 saw about $93 billion in losses. That was from 28 separate billion-dollar disasters, storms, wildfires, hurricanes, a real mix.
Okay, 93 billion, then what?
Then 2024 saw a massive jump, huge, up to about $218 billion from 27 events. And get this, Hurricanes Helene and Milton alone were estimated at around $100 billion of that total.
Wow, half the total from just 2 storms.
Yeah. And then for 2025, up to mid-July, we're seeing these reports, still unverified, mind you, about...
How do their numbers compare?
It's a bit complex. For 2023, estimates vary wildly. Munich Re, the big reinsurer, pegged losses around $250 billion globally, with China heavily impacted by things like Typhoon Doksuri and major floods. China's official figures were lower, maybe around 48 billion.
Okay, quite a range. And 2024?
2024 estimates for China are roughly in the $50 to $100 billion range. Again, primarily driven by floods and typhoons.
And this year, 2025 so far?
Partially, up to July, China reported about $28 billion in losses from 25 major flood events. But listen to this impact. Those floods affected nearly 14 million people. 13.74 million.
14 million people affected. That's staggering. So China's pattern seems dominated by floods and typhoons, which fits its geography. But that huge displacement number, that sounds like it could be targeting populated areas if you were thinking strategically.
It certainly raises that question, doesn't it? The human impact, the displacement is massive, even if the reported dollar figures sometimes seem lower relative to the U.S. for certain years.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. We have the framework, we have this proxy data. Now the big question, who's winning this hypothetical covert war? How do we even judge that?
Right. So we tried to break it down using three main yardsticks, three metrics. First, just raw damage inflicted.
All right, metric one. Let's play devil's advocate. If the U.S. is hypothetically attacking China, how does that look based on the data?
Well, if the U.S. is the attacker, those 2025 floods in China, 25 events, almost 28 billion in damage, nearly 14 million people affected, that looks like potentially successful targeting of known flood-prone areas like Guizhou or Hunan, and hitting agriculture, maybe disrupting rice crops in places like Heilongjiang. That could seriously strain China's food security, its economy. But there's a but.
Okay.
China's death tolls per event often seem relatively low, like reports of only 6 deaths in Rongjiang during major flooding. That suggests they're actually very effective at mitigation, at least in terms of saving lives.
Interesting. So massive disruption, but maybe lower immediate human cost per event. Now, flip it if China's attacking the U.S.
Then you look at those huge economic hits in the U.S. 2024 hurricanes causing $100 billion. Those possible 2025 Texas floods with potentially high death tolls, hitting infrastructure, urban centers. The economic difference is stark there. U.S. loss in 2024, over $200 billion. China's estimate, $50 to $100 billion.
Right.
So purely on damage inflicted, China seems to have an edge in causing massive economic damage to the U.S., but maybe the U.S. is causing more widespread societal disruption in China with that huge displacement figure. It's a bit of a split decision on damage alone.
Okay, so inflicting damage is one thing, but how well do they cope? That brings us to the second metric.
Yeah.
Resilience to attacks.
Exactly. How well do they bounce back? For the U.S., you've got a decentralized response FEMA, state agencies. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it struggles, especially with back-to-back disasters like we saw in 2024, with hurricanes and wildfires overlapping.
And those reports about delayed warnings in Texas, if true, show a vulnerability.
Right. But the U.S. has big strengths too. High insurance penetration is key. In 2024, maybe 58% of losses were insured. That cushions the blow financially. Plus, the overall economy is robust. It can absorb shocks eventually.
Okay, and China's resilience. You mentioned effective evacuations, but maybe infrastructure issues.
Precisely. China's centralized system is incredibly good at mass, rapid evacuations. Getting 80,000 people out quickly in Guizhou that minimizes deaths dramatically, that's a huge strength. Weaknesses on the financial and structural side. Very low insurance coverage, maybe only 8% in the Asia-Pacific region for these kinds of events. So recovery relies heavily on government aid, screening budgets, and yes, issues with aging infrastructure or sometimes poorly constructed buildings. The so-called tofu dregs projects can make the physical damage much worse when a flood or quake hits.
So for resilience, China seems better at protecting lives immediately through evacuations, but the U.S. might recover better economically in the longer term due to insurance and wealth. Who gets the edge here?
It's tough, but I'd lean slightly towards China having the resilience edge in the context of this hypothetical war, primarily because minimizing immediate death tolls might be a key strategic objective in a covert conflict, despite the weaker economic bounce back.
Okay, interesting take. That leaves our third metric, strategic advantage. What underlying factors give each side an edge in waging this kind of war?
Here you look at broader capabilities. The U.S. definitely has a technological advantage, superior satellites, better long-range weather forecasting, a global military footprint that could, theoretically, support deploying weather modification tech far away.
Right.
And its diverse climate might even let it, say, target China's monsoon season while hoping to avoid blowback hitting North America directly.
But what about U.S. weaknesses? Political gridlock, Funding issues.
Those are potential drags, absolutely.
Ah.
Domestic political fights, debates over funding agencies like FEMA, those could definitely hinder a cohesive, long-term secret strategy, either offensive or defensive.
And China's strategic position.
Their big advantage is that state-controlled system. It allows for rapid decision-making and deployment. If they want to scale up cloud seeding, they can do it fast. If they want to mobilize resources for disaster response, it happens centrally. Plus, think about the Belt and Road Initiative. Could they potentially extend weather tech capabilities or data gathering through partner countries? That could amplify their reach and influence.
What are China's limitations, though?
Well, potential issues with data transparency, sometimes it's hard to know the real impact of events. And rapid, maybe poorly planned urbanization can actually create new vulnerabilities to floods or storms that wouldn't have existed before.
So, weighing those strategic factors, tech edge for the U.S., but agility for China.
Pretty much. I'd probably give the overall strategic advantage edge narrowly to the United States,
Right.
mainly due to that technological and logistical superiority for potential advanced manipulation. But China's centralized control gives it a real speed advantage in deployment and response.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize all this. We've looked at damage, resilience, strategic edge. If we had to call a winner in this hypothetical war, as of now, mid-2025, based on our proxy data, who seems ahead?
Based purely on the economic damage figures we discussed, particularly that huge spike for the U.S. in 2024, you'd have to say China appears to be winning on that front.
In flipping more costly damage.
Yes. They seem effective, hypothetically, at hitting high-value U.S. assets, causing massive financial pain. And their own resilience in minimizing death tolls helps their position, too.
But there's a counter-argument, right, about the U.S. impact on China.
Absolutely. The U.S. might be playing a different game. That staggering figure of nearly 14 million displaced in China in early 2025 suggests the U.S. could be focusing on causing broader societal disruption, targeting population centers, maybe impacting food security more directly.
And the U.S. tech edge might mean their attacks are harder to detect, subtler.
That's the theory. If they can achieve effects with greater precision or less obvious methods, like ionospheric manipulation instead of just brute force cloud seeding, it enhances plausible deniability.
So if we were to speculate on actual tactics, what might the U.S. be doing?
A hypothetical U.S. strategy could involve things like subtly amplifying China's natural monsoon season, trying to worsen floods in key agricultural or urban areas, exploiting known infrastructure weaknesses, maybe using those advanced techniques to steer typhoons slightly off their natural course, just enough to maximize damage while still looking natural.
And China's tactics against the U.S.?
China might focus on intensifying storms, hitting economically vital areas like hurricanes on the Gulf or East Coast, or triggering major inland river flooding like perhaps those Texas events, hitting economic hubs hard, or theoretically attempting to induce droughts in the U.S. agricultural heartland to disrupt food supplies.
But we have to keep hammering this point. The risks are enormous for both sides, right?
Huge. That imprecision we talked about means blowback is always a possibility. China's floods could wash out their own crops downstream. U.S.-steered hurricanes could still hit allies or unexpectedly strengthen, and the need for absolute secrecy is paramount if either side definitively detects manipulation.
The whole thing could blow up. Diplomatic crisis, military confrontation.
Exactly. The covert nature is fragile.
Which brings us neatly to the big limitations of this whole theory. Why we have to keep stressing this is hypothetical. First off, the tech itself. Are we really anywhere close to weaponizing weather on this scale?
Honestly, no. Current tech like cloud seeding, it's localized, small scale, influencing rainfall slightly in one area, controlling or creating massive storms, steering hurricanes, inducing widespread drought that remains firmly in the realm of speculation. It would require energy levels and scientific understanding far beyond what we currently have.
So the weapons might not even exist yet. And then even if they did, attribution, proving it.
That's perhaps the biggest hurdle. How do you distinguish a deliberately manipulated hurricane from just a really bad natural one? Climate change is already making extreme weather more common. Attributing a specific event to hostile action is incredibly, maybe impossibly, difficult.
Yeah, you see chatter online like about the Texas floods, people wondering. But it's just speculation, no proof.
Exactly. Public suspicion might exist, but proving it to a scientific or legal standard needed for international relations, that's a whole different ballgame. It makes the idea of a sustained war very problematic.
And finally, the geopolitical fallout if it did come out, if the secrecy failed.
It would be catastrophic. Imagine the global reaction if proof emerged that one superpower was deliberately causing disasters in another. International condemnation, sanctions, potentially even military retaliation. The risk of escalation is so immense, it acts as a powerful deterrent, making the whole endeavor almost too dangerous to contemplate seriously for any rational state actor.
Okay, so wrapping this up, where do we land? In this purely hypothetical scenario, this covert weather war.
Well, crunching our proxy numbers up to mid-July 2025, China seems to hold maybe a slight edge, primarily based on inflicting greater economic damage on the U.S., particularly in 2024. But the U.S. might be gaining ground or playing a longer game. By focusing on societal disruption in China, think that massive displacement leveraging its potential technological edge for perhaps subtler attacks.
So the nuance here is key.
Yeah.
It's not just about who hits harder financially.
Not at all. It highlights that strategic advantage might actually lie less in the raw power to attack and more in that often undervalued aspect of resilience, adaptation, how you withstand these shocks, whether they're natural or hypothetically manipulated. The U.S. tech potential is vast, but China's centralized control and ability to manage immediate human impact give it that delicate lead for now in our speculative model.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to chew on. What happens if this weaponized weather, this atmospheric battlefield, what happens when it doesn't respect borders? When the storm you unleash comes back at you or triggers unforeseen global climate effects? Both sides, in this scenario, risk massive self-inflicted harm because the weather is just so unpredictable. Any victory could easily become Pyrrhic, costing far more than it gains. So what really stands out to you about this idea, this concept of a conflict fought not on land or sea, but in the very air around us?
These are the views for hundreds of thousands of people right now, as multiple places in the United States are on fire. Places that once stood for a long time, now being burnt down. Texas being flooded again today for the second time in the same exact location. Oh, and by the way, while all this stuff is happening in the US, we have all these radars just shutting down for random oblivious reasons. Get to this in a second. What if I told you it looks like there's a hurricane heading to Texas possibly as well? Let me ask you all this. Why is it always Texas? Do you remember the deadly freeze that Texas had and then 2 floods within the same exact week? I want you to notice 2 things. 1, the way this storm just blows up and goes right over Kerrsville. And 2, notice where the hurricane's coming from up there. And much like the last time, this storm barely moved at all and we had 30 foot, 32 foot in 3 hours? Back to the hurricane though, completely unrelated. What is all this orange stuff right here on this radar? Again, not relevant whatsoever, but also, we have these 3 radars in Florida down right now, then 1 got struck by lightning, something else happened with a different one. Every single day a radar's going down. Not to mention many publicly used radars going down indefinitely. I wonder why all of this is happening. And of course, unrelated, not relevant at all, a whole lot of people are noticing their bodies of waters are no longer producing waves, but instead producing these weird little vibrational patterns. A lot of people, a lot of places, but specifically the Gulf of America, you know, right there. This video right here is just for attention while I talk. It's just some guy changing the frequency and adjusting the water. And I mean, speaking of frequency, of course, unrelevant, the Schumann frequency's been acting up for a week straight now. 25 hertz, by the way. And about 10,000 acres burning and fire tornadoes around Utah and Arizona. I mean, really, what is even going on at this point?